Lena Harper hit the gas so hard the steering wheel shook in her hands. The old car rattled like it was about to split apart right there on the highway, and maybe that would have been easier than what she was running from. Behind her, the lights of the Blackstone compound were shrinking into nothing, swallowed by fog and pine trees, and 5 miles of mountain road she would never drive again. Her hands were still trembling, not from the cold. She could still feel him on her skin. The weight of Cale Mercer, the way his breath had come in rough waves against her neck, the way the mate bond had cracked open inside her chest like a door she never asked to unlock. That door was still open, and it was howling at her to turn the car around. She kept driving. 3 hours ago, Lena had been invisible. She had been nothing, a low-ranking Omega in a pack that treated Omegas the way most people treated furniture. Useful in the background, forgettable. She had spent 4 years clearing plates from banquet tables, folding linens for ceremonies she was not welcome to attend, and keeping her eyes down when the ranked wolves walked past. That was the deal. You stayed quiet. You stayed small. You survived. Then the blood moon rite happened. She was not supposed to be there. The rite was for mated pairs and eligible ranked wolves, not for the girl who scrubbed grease out of copper pots at 3 in the morning. But Cora, the kitchen manager, had sent her to deliver wine to the East Terrace, and the East Terrace opened directly onto the ceremonial grounds, and the moon had already risen, fat and red and pulsing with something old. Lena had felt it in her bones first. A pull, like a hook behind her navel, dragging her forward. Then she smelled him. Cedar and iron, and something underneath both of those things that had no name, only heat. Her wolf, the one she had spent years keeping quiet and obedient and half asleep, woke up so fast Lena nearly dropped the wine tray. Her vision sharpened, her teeth ached. Every hair on her body stood straight. Across the grounds, standing in the center of the ceremonial circle, with firelight cutting shadows across his face, the alpha king of the Blackstone pack turned his head and looked directly at her. Cale Mercer. She had seen him before. Everyone had seen him before. He was the kind of man whose presence changed the weight of a room, tall in a way that made door frames look like suggestions, built like the mountain his pack was named after. And his face, that face, was not the kind you looked at and then looked away from. It was the kind you looked at and forgot your own name. He was staring at her, not past her, not through her, at her. The mate bond hit them both at the same time. Lena knew this because she watched his expression change. She watched the most powerful wolf in 5 territories go rigid, his jaw locking, his hands curling at his sides, his nostrils flaring once, twice, and then his eyes found hers across 40 feet of firelit stone, and they held. They did not let go. She did not remember dropping the tray. She did not remember walking toward him. She remembered his hand closing around her wrist, the way the crowd parted without being told, and the silence that followed them into the Alpha House like a living thing. What happened behind that closed door was the most honest thing Lena Harper had ever experienced. The bond made sure of that. There was no hiding, no performing, no small talk to fill the gaps between strangers. Just 2 wolves recognizing each other on a level that had nothing to do with choice and everything to do with something older than both of them. By morning, she was alone in his bed. The sheets smelled like cedar. The pillow she had used was cold. She found her clothes folded on a chair. That detail lodged somewhere under her ribs, because it meant someone had folded them. Not Cale. Someone else had been in the room. Someone had watched her sleep and folded her clothes and left without waking her, and the intimacy of that trespass made her stomach turn. She dressed quickly and opened the door. Owen Drake was leaning against the opposite wall, arms crossed, his expression set to the particular frequency of polite cruelty that ranked wolves reserved for people beneath them. Owen was Cale's beta, second in command, the kind of man who smiled while delivering information designed to break you. He smiled now. "Good morning," he said. Lena said nothing. "The Alpha is in council." The Ashford delegation arrived at dawn. He paused, letting those words find their target. Lady Vivian Ashford specifically. She is expected to formalize the mating alliance by the next full moon. The hallway tilted, or maybe Lena tilted. Same result. You should know that the alliance with the Ashford pack is the only thing preventing a territorial war that would cost this pack everything, Owen continued. His tone was patient, almost kind, the way someone might explain gravity to a child standing on a ledge. The Alpha understands his responsibilities. He has always understood his responsibilities. Lena's throat was dry. Does he know? Know what? About the bond. Owen's smile did not change. The Alpha does not have the luxury of bonds, Miss Harper. He has a pact to protect, a treaty to honor, and a mate who was selected for strategic value, not because the moon decided to play games with an Omega's biology. Hote. The words landed exactly where they were designed to land. You have until midday to collect your things, Owen said. A car will take you to the border. You will receive a small compensation for your years of service. The pack thanks you. He straightened up, smoothed his jacket, and walked away. Lena stood in that hallway for 11 minutes. She counted. She did not cry. She did not scream. She stood there and counted the seconds because counting was something she could control, and right now the list of things she could control was exactly one item long. At minute 8, she heard voices from the council chamber at the end of the hall. The door was cracked. She should not have walked toward it. She walked toward it. Through the gap, she could see the long table, the ranked wolves seated around it, and Cale at the head. Beside him sat a woman with auburn hair and perfect posture. Vivian Ashford. She was the kind of woman who looked like she had been designed by committee, every feature approved by consensus, nothing out of place. Dominic Ashford, Vivian's father and alpha of the Ashford pack, was speaking. His voice was low and certain. The mating will proceed as agreed. My daughter is prepared. Your pack will have safe passage through the eastern corridor. In exchange, we expect the Mercer bloodline to honor this union fully and publicly. Lena waited for Cale to say something, to hesitate, to look toward the door, to give some sign that last night had happened, that it had mattered, that the bond screaming between them right now was more than biology. He nodded once. Agreed, he said. One word, one syllable, and Lena's entire chest caved in. She did not take the car Owen offered. She did not collect compensation. She walked to the staff quarters, took $200 from the emergency tin under her mattress, grabbed her backpack, and stole a car from the service lot behind the kitchen. It was a dented gray sedan with half a tank of gas and a broken passenger mirror. She drove south. The mate bond pulled at her like a fishhook lodged between her lungs, and every mile she drove made it worse. It was not pain, exactly. It was absence. The sudden, violent awareness that something essential had been removed from her body, and she was expected to keep functioning without it. Like breathing with one lung. Like hearing with one ear. The world was suddenly incomplete in a way she could not explain and could not fix. She drove through the night. She stopped once for gas, at a station where the fluorescent lights buzzed like dying insects. She bought a bottle of water and a bag of chips she did not eat. The cashier looked at her with the mild curiosity people reserve for women who look like they have been crying, but clearly do not want to talk about it. By dawn, she was 200 miles from Blackstone territory. The mountains had flattened into farmland. The air smelled different, drier, less pine. She pulled into a rest stop and sat in the car with the engine running and her forehead against the steering wheel. The bond was still there, still pulling, still open. She imagined Cale sitting at his table with Vivian Ashford's hand on his arm. She imagined Owen Drake checking her room and finding it empty. She imagined the staff whispering about the Omega who vanished after the blood moon, constructing theories, forgetting her within the week. She was not someone people remembered. That was the thing about being invisible. When you disappeared, no one noticed the difference. 3 weeks later, in a motel bathroom with cracked tile and a flickering light, Lena took 4 pregnancy tests. She bought them at 3 different pharmacies because the first result could not possibly be right. The second one, either. All 4 tests showed the same thing. She sat on the motel floor with her back against the bathtub and the 4 little plastic sticks lined up on the tile like evidence at a crime scene. Her hands were pressed flat against her stomach. Nothing had changed yet. No bump, no movement, no sign. Just the tests and the math. One night, one bond, one result that was about to reshape every remaining second of her life. She could go back. She could stand before the council and announce what she was carrying and demand recognition. Pack law was clear on this. An alpha's offspring had rights. A mate bond, even an unclaimed one, had legal standing. But pack law was also clear on what happened to omegas who challenged mating alliances. And Kale had not said her name, had not come looking, had not fought. He had said agreed and nodded once. Lena picked up the tests, wrapped them in toilet paper, and dropped them in the trash. She bought a map at the motel front desk. Paper. Old-fashioned. The kind of map that did not require a signal or leave a digital trail. She spread it on the bed and looked for towns that were small, coastal, and far from anything. Her finger landed on a dot called Miran Bay. She had never heard of it. That was the point. She packed the car and drove west. The bond pulled east. She ignored it the way you ignore a toothache when you cannot afford the dentist, by clenching your jaw and thinking about something else. The something else was the child inside her. The something else was survival. The road to Miran Bay wound through farmland and then forest, and then a stretch of coast where the ocean appeared between the trees like a surprise, gray and endless and completely indifferent to everything happening inside Lena Harper's body. She arrived at dusk. The town was small. One grocery store, one diner, a post office, a marina where fishing boats rocked against their ropes, houses with peeling paint and overgrown yards, and the kind of quiet that came from being forgotten by the rest of the world. It was perfect. She rented a room above the diner for the first week. The owner, a woman named Gladys with silver hair and no interest in conversation, charged her $30 a night and asked no questions. Lena ate breakfast downstairs each morning, eggs and toast and orange juice that tasted like it had been reconstituted from powder, and she looked at the rental listings taped to the community board near the register. On day 4, she found a house, small, 2 bedrooms, a yard with a chain-link fence, and a garden that had been dead for at least a season. The landlord was an elderly man named Peter, who lived 3 towns over and communicated entirely through handwritten notes left in the mailbox. She paid first and last month's rent in cash. She stood in the empty living room with her backpack on the floor and her hand on her stomach, and the ocean audible through the thin walls, and she made a decision. No one from Blackstone would find her here. No one from any pack would find her here. She would raise this child in the human world, away from bonds and councils and men who chose treaties over people. She would be small. She would be quiet. She would be invisible. She was very good at invisible. What she did not know, standing in that empty room with the light fading and the waves crashing beyond the bluff, was that there were 2 of them. 2 heartbeats, not one. 2 lives folding themselves into existence inside her body with the stubborn certainty of things that refuse to be denied. She would find out at her first prenatal appointment in 3 weeks, when the technician moved the ultrasound wand across her stomach and went very quiet and then said, "Well, there are 2 of them." Lena stared at the ceiling. 2, she repeated. Twins, the technician confirmed, as though Lena might not understand the concept. Lena understood the concept. She understood it so well that she started laughing, right there on the examination table, laughing until her eyes watered and the technician looked concerned, because of course it was twins. Of course an alpha king's blood would not do anything by half. Of course the universe would look at a woman with $200 and a stolen car and say, "Here, have 2. She laughed until the laughing turned into something else, and then she stopped, and she wiped her face, and she asked the technician to print the ultrasound photo. She carried that photo in her wallet for 5 years. It wore soft at the edges. The image faded, but she kept it, because it was the only proof that the night of the blood moon had been real. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, when the bond ached so badly she could not breathe. She needed proof. The girls arrived in February during a rainstorm that knocked out the power across half of Miran Bay. Lena delivered them at the county hospital 20 miles inland, gripping the bed rail so hard she bent the metal, and later the nurse made a joke about how she must work out, and Lena smiled because the alternative was explaining that Omega wolves had roughly 4 times the grip strength of human women, and that was before the adrenaline kicked in. Naya came first. She came out screaming with a fury that silenced every other sound in the delivery room, her tiny face scrunched into a knot of pure indignation, as though being born was a personal insult she intended to address with management. She had dark hair, she had gray eyes, she had Cale Mercer's jawline in miniature, which should not have been possible on a newborn, but there it was. Sora came second, 11 minutes later. She came out quiet. Her eyes were open. She did not cry. She looked at the ceiling, and then she looked at Lena, and then she looked at her sister, and something passed between the two of them, some silent agreement that Lena would spend the next 5 years trying to decode. The nurse placed them both on Lena's chest, and the world contracted to the size of that bed. Everything outside that circle, the storm, the hospital, the bond still pulling east, ceased to matter. Lena held her daughters and breathed in the scent of them, and beneath the hospital smells of antiseptic and clean cotton, she caught something else. Cedar, faint, unmistakable. They smelled like their father. She closed her eyes and held them tighter. The first year was a blur of sleep deprivation and formula cans and diapers, and the particular exhaustion that comes from doing everything alone while pretending to the world that you are fine. Gladys from the diner gave Lena a job waitressing 3 shifts a week, with the understanding that the twins would sleep in a portable crib in the back office during service. It was not ideal. Nothing about this arrangement was ideal. But Gladys had raised 4 children herself, and she understood that sometimes survival looked messy, and that was acceptable. Lena learned the rhythms of Miran Bay, the way a fugitive learns the layout of a safe house, which door creaks, which window faces the street, which neighbors notice too much. She learned that the mail carrier, a man named Doug, came at 11:15 every morning and liked to chat. She learned that the woman across the street, Mrs. Patterson, kept a mental registry of every car that parked on the block. She learned that the couple who ran the grocery store, Henry and B. Calloway, would hold her groceries behind the counter if she was short on cash, and that they would never mention it again. She learned to be grateful without being visible. She learned to accept kindness without inviting closeness. She built a life like a house of cards, functional and fragile and dependent on nothing moving too fast. The twins grew. They grew the way alpha-blooded children grow, which is to say faster and more intensely than any human child, and with a stubbornness that bordered on structural. By age 1, Naya was walking, not the wobbling, uncertain steps of a normal toddler. Walking, straight-backed, determined, as though she had somewhere to be and was already late. She walked into furniture and walls and Lena's legs and the neighbor's garden with the same unshakable conviction that the obstacle was the problem, not her trajectory. Sora did not walk until she was 14 months old, and when she did, it was because she had spent 3 months watching Naya and had apparently decided to skip the learning phase entirely. She stood up from the living room floor, crossed the room in a straight line, picked up the stuffed rabbit she wanted, and sat back down. Lena watched this happen from the kitchen doorway with a mug of coffee frozen halfway to her mouth. By age 2, the differences between the twins had sharpened into something you could map. Naya was fire. She was loud, physical, confrontational, and possessed of an emotional range that could swing from joy to fury in the time it took to blink. She broke 3 doorknobs by the time she was 2.5. She growled at a dog that barked at her from behind a fence, and the dog whimpered and sat down. Sora was observation. She watched everything. She catalogued. She learned. She could tell when Lena was upset before Lena knew it herself, appearing silently at her side with a blanket or a book or just her hand, small and warm, pressed against Lena's arm. She did not speak until she was nearly 3, and when she finally did, her first word was not mama or milk or ball. Her first word was hiding. She said it while standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the yard, and Lena's blood went cold. "What did you say, baby?" Sora pointed at the fence. "Hiding." There was a cat crouched behind the fence post, stalking a bird. Lena exhaled. Just a cat. Just a word. Just her daughter being observant, which she always was, which was the thing about Sora that kept Lena up at night, because a child who watched that carefully was a child who would eventually see things her mother did not want seen. By age 3, the wolf blood was impossible to ignore. Naya had bitten another child at preschool, not hard enough to break skin, but hard enough that the teacher called Lena in for a meeting and used phrases like aggressive tendencies and possible behavioral assessment. Lena sat in the tiny plastic chair across from the teacher and nodded and said all the right things while privately calculating how long before she had to pull both girls out and try somewhere else. Sora, meanwhile, had informed her preschool teacher that she was lying about being happy and that her smile was wrong on the inside. The teacher had not called a meeting. The teacher had quit. The claw marks started appearing on Sora's 4th birthday. Lena found them in the morning, 4 thin scratches scored into the drywall behind Naya's bed. Not deep, not alarming if you were human and did not know what to look for. But Lena was not human, and she knew exactly what she was looking at. Naya's wolf was waking up. The claws would come first, then the teeth, then the eyes, shifting from gray to gold in moments of strong emotion. Then, eventually, the shift itself, the full transformation from girl to wolf. And when that happened, there would be no more pretending, no more hiding, no more passing as human in a human town. Lena stood in front of that scratched wall and pressed her forehead against it and breathed. She had been taking wolf-suppressant herbs for 4 years, black market compounds she ordered online from a supplier who asked no questions and shipped in plain brown packages. The herbs dulled her wolf, muted her senses, dampened the bond, and slowly, methodically, poisoned her from the inside out. She knew the side effects. She had read the forums. Prolonged suppression caused fatigue, weight loss, immune decline, sensory degradation. It aged you. It hollowed you. Lena was 27 years old, and she looked 35. She did not care. Looking 35 was preferable to looking like a wolf, which was preferable to being found, which was preferable to standing in front of a council that had discarded her and explaining that she had been carrying the Alpha King's daughters while he signed a treaty and married someone else. So she took the herbs, she brewed them into a tea that tasted like dirt and copper pennies, and she drank it every morning while the girls ate cereal and watched cartoons, and she told herself it was fine. It was not fine. The bond had not faded. 4 years of suppressants and 200 miles of distance, and the bond was still there, still open, still pulling east with the blind persistence of a compass needle. She could feel Kale like a bruise she could not see. Some nights the ache was mild, a background hum she could ignore by staying busy. Other nights it was a sound, a low, sustained note that vibrated through her bones and made sleep impossible. On those nights, she stood at the kitchen window and looked east and pressed her hand flat against the glass and wondered if he ever felt it too, if the bond pulled at him the way it pulled at her. If he ever woke in the dark and reached for something that was not there, then she would remember the council room, the nod, the single word, agreed, and she would turn away from the window and go back to bed. The twins turned 4. Naya's claws came in fully, retractable but sharp, and Lena taught her to file them down with a metal nail file every night, turning it into a game, a bedtime ritual, something normal. Sora's senses sharpened to a point that made Lena deeply uneasy. She could hear conversations from 3 houses away. She could smell rain before the clouds formed. She looked at her mother sometimes with those gray eyes, Kale's eyes, and Lena could feel the question forming behind them, the question Sora had not yet asked but would, the question that had no safe answer. Where is our father? Lena had prepared a story. She had rehearsed it. A man she had loved once. A man who had to go away. A man who did not know about them. The The story was clean and simple and contained exactly enough truth to pass inspection. But Sora would not accept a clean story. Sora would push. Sora would watch Lena's face while she spoke, and she would catalog every micro-expression, and she would know, the way she always knew, that the story was wrong on the inside. So Lena did what she had always done. She postponed. She distracted. She survived another day and hoped tomorrow would be easier. Tomorrow was never easier. Tomorrow was the day Naya got sent home from preschool for growling at a boy who took her crayons, a growl so deep and resonant that the boy's mother later described it as not a sound a child should be able to make. Tomorrow was the day Sora drew a picture of a man with gray eyes standing in front of a mountain and told Lena it was the man who lives in my chest. Tomorrow was the day Lena fainted at work and woke up on the diner floor with Gladys standing over her, pressing a cold cloth to her forehead, saying, "Girl, when was the last time you ate?" The truth was that eating had become difficult. The suppressants killed her appetite. Her wolf, starved and caged and desperate, had begun turning inward, consuming what it could not express. Lena had lost 12 pounds in 3 months. Her hair was thinning. Her hands shook in the mornings. She was disappearing. Not the kind of disappearing she had chosen. Not the deliberate invisibility of a woman hiding in a small town. This was different. This was her body eating itself alive because she had denied it the one thing it needed, its wolf, its bond, its mate, and it had run out of ways to compensate. She needed to stop the herbs. She knew this. She could not stop the herbs. She knew this too. If her wolf came back, the bond would strengthen, the pull would sharpen, and Kale, wherever he was, whatever he was doing, would feel it. The bond worked both ways. A suppressed wolf was a muted signal. A free wolf was a beacon. She could not afford to be a beacon. So she drank the tea. She worked her shifts. She raised her girls. She filed Naya's claws and answered Sora's questions with half-truths, and she pretended, every single day, that this arrangement was sustainable. It was not sustainable. And 600 miles east, in the stone halls of Blackstone, the Alpha King had already begun to hunt. Cale Mercer had not slept a full night in 3 years. This was not an exaggeration or a figure of speech. It was a medical fact that his pack physician had documented. A wolf who cannot locate his bonded mate enters a state of chronic physiological distress that manifests as insomnia, elevated aggression, reduced immune function, and an inability to form new pair bonds. The physician had delivered this diagnosis in clinical language while Cale sat behind his desk with his fists clenched on the oak surface and his wolf clawing at the inside of his skull like a prisoner rattling bars. "Your body believes your mate is alive," the physician said. "The bond is active, suppressed, but active. Whatever is on the other end of it, wherever she is alive, and she is blocking the signal." "She," Cale repeated. The physician hesitated. "The bond is specific. It formed during the blood moon rite, 5 years ago. Your wolf identified a mate. That identification has not been rescinded." Cale knew all of this. He had known it the morning after the rite, when he woke up and the bed beside him was empty and his wolf began a howl inside his chest that had not stopped since. He had known it when he walked into the council chamber and sat beside Vivian Ashford and said, "Agreed," because that was what an Alpha King did. He protected his pack. He honored his treaties. He sacrificed the personal for the political. He had not known who the woman was. That was the thing nobody understood, the thing he could not explain without sounding like a fool. The blood moon rite had been chaos, hundreds of wolves, firelight, ceremony. She had appeared at the edge of the crowd like something the moon itself had pushed forward. Dark hair, brown eyes, a face he could draw from memory but could not name. She had smelled like honey and autumn leaves and the sharp green scent of something growing. His wolf had lunged for her with a certainty that left no room for thought. And then she was gone. Owen had handled it. Owen always handled things. That was what betas did. They managed the complications so the alpha could focus on the pack. Cale had not asked what Owen said to her. He had not asked where she went. He had been standing in a council room with Dominic Ashford's eyes on him and a treaty document on the table, and the weight of 4,000 pack members pressing down on his shoulders, and he had done what the position required. He had nodded. He had hated himself for it every day since. The mating with Vivian lasted 2 years. It was not a marriage in the human sense. It was a political bond, formalized by ceremony, recognized by pack law, and utterly hollow at its core. Vivian was intelligent, composed, and completely aware that the man she had been bonded to was in love with a ghost. She bore it with grace for the first year. The second year, the rejection sickness began. Rejection sickness was what happened when a wolf was bonded to a mate whose true bond lay elsewhere. The body knew. It always knew. Vivian grew thin, then pale, then sharp in ways that had nothing to do with her personality. She snapped at staff. She avoided touch. She spent entire days in her quarters with the curtains drawn. When she left, she did so with dignity. She stood in the great hall with her packed bags and her father's car waiting outside, and she said, "You are not a bad man, Cale. But you are a dishonest one, and I will not waste another year paying for it." She was right. He knew she was right. He let her go, and the pack whispered that the Alpha King was cursed, that the blood moon had broken something in him, that he was unmateable. The whispers were not entirely wrong. After Vivian left, Cale began searching, quietly at first. A question here, a records check there. He knew almost nothing about the woman from the right. He did not know her name. He did not know her rank. He knew she was an Omega because his wolf had registered her scent signature, and he knew she had worked in the compound because she had appeared from the direction of the kitchens. But the staff records from that period were incomplete. 3 Omegas had left the compound in the weeks following the right. 1 had transferred to a sister pack in the north. 1 had been relocated to human territory as part of a resettlement program. 1 had simply vanished. No forwarding address, no exit paperwork, no trail. Her name was listed as L. Harper. That was all. A first initial and a surname and an employment record that showed 4 years of kitchen service, and a final entry that read, "Departed, no notice." Cale stared at that entry for a long time. He assigned his best tracker to the search. Juno Hale was a female wolf with a reputation for finding things that did not want to be found. She was lean, quiet, and patient in the way a spider is patient. She did not chase. She simply placed herself in the right spot and waited for the web to vibrate. Juno spent 2 years pulling threads. She searched pack databases. She cross-referenced resettlement records. She monitored border-crossing logs and human world identity registrations and the informal network of wolves who had left pack life for human territory. Nothing. L. Harper had dissolved. "She is either dead or very good at hiding," Juno told Cale during one of their monthly briefings. "Personally, I think she is very good at hiding, because the bond is still active and dead wolves do not maintain active bonds." "Then find her." "I am trying. She has left no digital footprint, no pack registration, no medical records in any wolf-affiliated system. Whoever she is living entirely in the human world, and she is doing it without touching any of the systems we can search." Cale dismissed Juno and sat alone in his study, and felt the bond pulse between his ribs, faint but steady, a heartbeat that was not his own. She was alive, she was hiding, and he had no idea why. The break came in the 3rd year, from an unexpected direction. Juno had been monitoring black market supply chains for wolf-related contraband, tracking illegal weapons, counterfeit pack documents, and restricted substances. Among the restricted substances were wolf-suppressant compounds, herbal mixtures that could dampen a wolf's abilities and mute bond connections. The suppressants were popular with rogues and fugitives. They were also toxic with prolonged use, and they were exclusively purchased by wolves who had a reason to disappear. Juno flagged a recurring purchase order. Someone in a coastal town called Miran Bay had been ordering wolf-suppressant compounds every 6 weeks for 4 years. The quantities were consistent, The payment was always cash, routed through a prepaid card. The shipping address was a post office box. "It is a long shot," Juno said. "There are dozens of wolves hiding in human territory. How many of them have been hiding for exactly 5 years?" Juno nodded slowly. "I will go to Mirren Bay." "No," Cale said. "I will." He told Owen he was taking a personal trip. Owen raised an eyebrow but did not argue. The beta had learned, over the past 3 years, that questioning Cale on this subject produced no useful results and significant personal discomfort. Cale drove south alone. He took a truck, not a convoy. No guards, no entourage, no Alpha King ceremony. Just a man in a truck with a knot of anxiety in his chest and a 5-year-old Bond pulling him toward a town he had never heard of. He arrived in Mirren Bay on a Tuesday afternoon in September. The town was exactly what the map had promised: small, coastal, unremarkable. He drove through the main street, past the diner and the grocery store and the marina, and felt nothing. His wolf was restless but not alarmed. The Bond hummed at its usual frequency. He found the post office and parked across the street and waited. 3 hours. 4. The afternoon light shifted, and the fishing boats came in, and the town moved through its routines with the unhurried certainty of a place that had no secrets. Then, at 6:15, a woman walked out of the diner. His wolf hit the inside of his chest so hard he gripped the steering wheel. She was thin, thinner than he remembered, though he had not seen her clearly enough that night to remember details. Her hair was pulled back. Her shoulders were drawn in. She moved like someone trying to take up as little space as possible, and he recognized that posture because he had seen it in every Omega who had ever lived in fear of being noticed. She walked down the sidewalk and turned onto a residential street, and he followed at a distance, on foot now, his truck abandoned by the post office, his pulse hammering in his temples. She stopped at a small house with a chain-link fence. She opened the gate. She walked up the porch steps. The front door opened before she reached it. 2 small girls burst out. They were 4 years old, maybe 5. They had dark hair and gray eyes, and they moved with the coiled energy of wolf pups, all elbows and knees and barely contained momentum. One of them launched herself at the woman and wrapped her arms around her legs with enough force to stagger an adult. The other stood on the porch and watched, still, observant, her gray eyes tracking everything. Cale stopped walking. The girls had his face. Not in the vague way that children sometimes resemble distant relatives. Not in the soft, interpretive way that people see what they want to see. These children had his jaw, his brow, his eye color, his expression, the particular way a mercer held their head when assessing a situation, the tilt, the focus, the absolute certainty. He was looking at his own blood. The Bond exploded. 5 years of suppression and distance and deliberate denial, and it shattered in a single second. His wolf surged forward with a howl that tore through his nervous system and made his vision blur gold. On the porch, the quiet girl, the watcher, turned her head and looked directly at him. Across 50 feet of sidewalk and fading September light, Cale Mercer's daughter looked at him with his own eyes and did not blink. Lena followed her daughter's gaze. She turned. She saw him. The bag of groceries she was carrying hit the porch floor. A can of tomato soup rolled down the steps and came to rest against the bottom railing, spinning once, twice, and then stopping. Nobody moved. The evening settled around them like a held breath, the town continuing its routines beyond this street, beyond this fence, beyond this impossible geometry of 2 people who had spent 5 years running from and toward the same invisible thread. Lena's hand found her daughter's shoulder. The other girl, the loud one, stopped squeezing her mother's legs and turned to look at the stranger on the sidewalk. Her nostrils flared. Her eyes widened. She growled. It was a small growl, the growl of a child whose wolf was barely awake, but it carried the unmistakable resonance of alpha blood, and it was aimed at the tall man standing on her sidewalk looking at her mother with an expression that contained about 17 emotions, none of which had been properly sorted. Lena pulled both girls behind her. "No," she said. It was not clear who she was talking to, the child or the man or the bond, or the 5 years of careful, invisible life that had just been ripped open by the appearance of the one person she could not hide from. Cale took one step forward. "Lena," he said. Her name. He knew her name. Somewhere in the past 5 years, he had learned it. She felt the bond surge, and she fought it the way she had fought it every day for 5 years, with her teeth clenched and her spine straight, and the absolute refusal to let this man see her break. "You need to leave," she said. He did not leave. He looked at the twins, at their faces, at the gray eyes that were his eyes, and the dark hair that was his hair, and the growl, that tiny defiant growl, that was his wolf diluted through 2 generations and still strong enough to make the hairs on his arms stand up. "How old are they?" His voice was quiet. "You need to leave." "Lena, how old are they?" "They are mine." Her voice cracked on the word, and she hated herself for it. "They are mine, and you do not get to stand on my sidewalk and ask questions when you chose a treaty over a bond, and let your beta throw me out like I was nothing." The words hit him. She watched them land. She watched something move behind his eyes, something that looked a lot like the moment before a building collapses, that brief, terrible stillness when the structure realizes it can no longer hold. "I did not know," he said. "You did not look." The quiet girl, Sora, stepped around Lena's legs and studied the man with the detached intensity of a scientist examining a specimen. She looked at his hands, his jaw, his eyes. She looked at her own hands, her own reflection in the window beside the door. "You look like us," she said. Cale knelt, slowly. "The way you kneel in front of something you are terrified of breaking." "Yes," he said, "I do." Lena grabbed Sora's arm and pulled her back. The touch was gentle, but the message was absolute. She was a wall. She had been a wall for 5 years, the only wall between her daughters and a world that would consume them, and she was not going to stop now, because a man she had spent one night with showed up on her porch looking wounded. "Go home, Cale." "I do not have one," he said, still kneeling. "Not since you left." She slammed the front door so hard the hinges groaned. Inside, she leaned against the door and slid to the floor and pressed her hands over her mouth to keep the sound in. Naya was pulling at her sleeve. Sora was standing 3 feet away, watching her mother with those eyes, those knowing, impossible eyes, cataloging every crack in the armor. "Mama," Naya said, tugging. "Mama, who is the big man?" Lena could not answer, not because she did not know, but because any honest answer would demolish every wall she had spent 5 years building. Outside, Cale Mercer stood on the sidewalk of a town he had never heard of, looking at a closed door, with the bond ringing in his chest like a bell that had been struck for the first time in 5 years. He did not leave Miran Bay. He rented the house next door. The rental office was a desk in the back of the grocery store. Henry Calloway handled it with the same unhurried calm he applied to everything, entering Cale's information into a ledger that had not been updated to a computer system and probably never would be. Cale paid 3 months in advance in cash, and Henry asked no questions because Henry had lived in Miran Bay long enough to know that the people who came here were people who did not want questions. The house was a mirror of Lena's. Same layout, same peeling paint, same chain-link fence separating the yards with a gap at the bottom where a cat could pass through. The gap meant that from his kitchen window, Cale could see Lena's backyard, and from Lena's kitchen window, she could see his. She noticed this immediately. The curtains on her kitchen window, which had been open for 4 years, were closed within an hour of Cale moving in. He did not force contact. He did not knock on her door. He did not approach the twins at the bus stop or introduce himself to the neighbors as their father, or do any of the things that his wolf was screaming at him to do, with the volume and persistence of a fire alarm that could not be silenced. He waited. This was not natural to him. Cale Mercer was a man who had spent his adult life making decisions and watching them be executed. He commanded. He strategized. He moved pieces on a board, and the board responded. But this was not a board. This was a woman who had every reason to hate him, and two children who did not know he existed, and no amount of alpha authority could fix what had been broken by silence and cowardice 5 years ago. He bought groceries at Henry's store. He walked the beach in the mornings. He sat on his porch in the evenings, and he did not look toward Lena's house, and he did not look away from it either. On the third day, Naya threw a ball over the fence. It was a red rubber ball, the kind sold in wire bins at grocery stores, and it bounced twice in Cale's yard and rolled to a stop near his porch steps. He heard the ball before he saw it, and then he heard the footsteps, quick and careless, the run of a child who has not yet learned to be afraid. Naya appeared at the fence gap. She crouched down and looked through it and saw Cale sitting on his porch. "That is my ball," she said. "I see that. Can you throw it back?" He picked up the ball and walked to the fence and held it out. Naya took it. Her fingers brushed his hand and something moved through the contact. Not the mate bond, something different, something that felt like recognition. His wolf went very still. "You are big," Naya said, looking up at him. "I am." "Are you a giant?" "No. My mama says giants are not real." "Your mama is probably right about most things." Naya considered this. She is right about some things. She is wrong about bedtime. 8 o'clock is too early. "I agree. You should tell her that. I do not think your mama wants to hear my opinions right now." Naya shrugged with the devastating indifference of a 4-year-old who has already lost interest in adult complications. She took her ball and disappeared back through the gap, and Cale sat down on his porch and pressed his hands against his face and breathed through the wave that hit him, the wave of something enormous and tender and terrifying, something he had no framework for, because nobody prepares you for the moment you meet your child for the first time, and she asks you if you are a giant. On the 4th day, Sora appeared. She did not come through the gap. She stood on the other side of the fence and looked at him through the chain links. She did not speak. She just watched the way she watched everything, with a patience that was completely foreign to a child her age and deeply familiar to Cale, because he had watched the world exactly this way when he was young, cataloging, calculating, building a map of everything before deciding how to move through it. She came back the 5th day, and the 6th. On the 7th day she brought a book. "Can you read?" she asked through the fence. "Yes. Read this." She pushed the book through the gap. It was a children's picture book about a bear who lost his hat. Cale read it aloud while sitting cross-legged on his side of the fence, and Sora sat cross-legged on hers, and when he was done, she said again, and he read it again. On the 8th day, Lena came to his door. She did not knock. She stood on his porch and waited until he opened it, and when he did, her expression was a locked gate. "Stay away from my daughters. They come to me, Lena. I do not go to them." "Then stop being here." "I am not leaving." "You left 5 years ago." "I did not leave. I failed to follow. There is a difference, and I will spend the rest of my life answering for it, but I will not answer for it from 600 miles away." She stared at him. Her arms were crossed. She was thinner than the last time he had seen her, and the last time he had seen her she had already been too thin. There were shadows under her eyes that looked like they had been there for years. Her wolf was so deeply suppressed he could barely sense it, just a faint shimmer behind a wall of chemicals and willpower. "What do you want?" she asked. "To know them." "And then what? Take them back to Blackstone? Present them to your council? Parade them in front of the same people who threw me out?" "Owen threw you out. Owen acted on his own authority, and I did not know until it was too late, and when I found out You what?" Her voice was low and steady, and it was the steadiness that carried the blade. "You what, Cale? You searched? You came looking? Because I have been waiting 5 years for a knock on my door, and the only knock I got was 3 days ago." He had no answer for that. He had answers for everything. He was an alpha king. Answers were his function, but he had no answer for the plain and devastating truth of what she had just said. She waited. He said nothing. "That is what I thought," she said, and she walked off his porch and went home. But she did not tell the twins to stay away from the fence. Cale noticed that. He noticed that the curtains in her kitchen opened an inch on day 9, and 2 inches on day 10, and by day 12 they were half open, and he could see her moving through the kitchen in the mornings, making breakfast, pouring juice, braiding Naya's hair, while Sora sat at the table reading. He did not wave, he did not watch, he simply existed next door and let the proximity do its work. On day 14, Lena collapsed at the diner. He heard it before anyone told him. His wolf, muted as the bond was, registered the spike of distress like a gunshot. He was on his feet and moving before he understood why, crossing the yard, crossing the street, following the pull to the diner where Gladys was kneeling beside Lena on the floor, and 2 customers were standing awkwardly nearby, and Lena was conscious but gray, her skin the color of paper, her breathing shallow and fast. "She just went down," Gladys said, looking up. 1 minute she was carrying plates, the next she was on the floor. Cale knelt beside her. He touched her face, and the bond flared so hard it whited out his vision for a full second. Her wolf, that poor starved creature behind its chemical cage, threw itself against the bond with a desperation that made his chest ache. "The herbs," he said, not a question. Lena's eyes were half open. "Do not. You are poisoning yourself. Do not." He picked her up. She weighed nothing. She weighed less than Naya and Sora combined, and carrying her out of the diner and down the street and into her house, he understood for the first time the real cost of what Owen had done 5 years ago. Not the betrayal, not the separation, the slow, invisible destruction of a woman who had decided that erasing herself was preferable to being found. He laid her on the couch. He found a blanket. He made her drink water. The twins were at preschool. The house was quiet. "How long have you been taking the suppressants?" he asked. 4 years. "At what dosage?" She closed her eyes. "Enough. Enough to do what? To die? Is that the plan?" Her eyes opened, and there was fire in them, dim but real, the ember of a wolf that refused to go out even as it was being smothered. "The plan is to keep my daughters safe. The plan is to keep them away from a world that discarded their mother. The plan is to survive long enough to raise them, and if surviving means suppressing the bond, then that is what I do. Lena, you are not surviving. You are declining. I can feel it through the bond. Your wolf is starving." "Good. A starving wolf is a quiet wolf. A starving wolf is a dying wolf." She turned her face away. He stayed. He made dinner for the twins when they came home from preschool. Simple things. Pasta, cut-up fruit, the kind of food he had no experience preparing, but could figure out from the contents of her kitchen. Naya accepted his presence with the cheerful adaptability of children who have not yet learned that strangers are supposed to be strange. Sora watched him make dinner with the quiet intensity of a chess player analyzing an opponent's opening moves. "You are in our house," Sora said. "I am. Mama is sick. She is tired. She will feel better soon." Sora studied him for a long moment. "You are not a giant," she said, "but you are not regular either." "No," Cale agreed. "I am not regular." Lena slept for 3 hours. When she woke, the kitchen was clean, the girls were in bed, and Cale was sitting in the armchair across from the couch, watching her the way Sora watched everything, with a patience that suggested he would wait as long as it took. "You cannot stay," she said. "I know. Then why are you here?" "Because you fell, and because there is no version of my life that makes sense without being in the same room as you." She stared at the ceiling. "Owen told me what he said to you," Cale continued. 3 years ago, when I confronted him, he told me everything. The hallway, the car, the compensation. He thought he was protecting the pack. He thought the alliance was more important than one Omega's bond. Was he wrong? The question hung between them. "Yes," Cale said. "He was wrong, and I was worse, because I let him be wrong on my behalf. I could have stopped it. I could have walked out of that council room and found you, and told Dominic Ashford to take his treaty and leave. I could have chosen you. But you did not. No, I did not. Why? Because I was afraid. Because the pack was at war. Because I had been told since I was a child that an alpha king does not get to want things. He gets to serve. He paused. I was wrong. And the word wrong does not begin to cover the damage. Lena said nothing for a long time. Then she said, Nyaya broke a doorknob last week. Just ripped it clean off. She does not know her own strength. Cale exhaled something that might have been a laugh. My mother says I pulled a door off its hinges when I was 3. Sora told her preschool teacher that she was lying. Not about a specific thing, just in general. She said the teacher's emotions were wrong on the inside. That is a tracker's instinct. She can read people. She can read everyone except me. I am the only person she cannot figure out, and it makes her furious. You are her mother. Mothers are supposed to be unsolvable. Lena looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since he had appeared on her sidewalk. She looked at his face, and she saw the same jaw on Naya, and the same eyes on Sora, and the same stubborn refusal to leave a room until the problem was resolved, and she felt the bond hum between them, not the desperate clawing of the past 5 years, but something quieter, something that sounded almost like relief. She did not forgive him. That was not what this was. But she opened the curtains all the way the next morning, and when Naya threw the ball over the fence again, Lena did not call her back. The package arrived at the Ashford compound on a Wednesday, delivered by a wolf named Porter, who trafficked information the way other people trafficked goods, quietly, efficiently, and for a price that made honesty irrelevant. Dominic Ashford opened it in his study with the door locked and the blinds drawn, because Dominic had learned long ago that the most valuable information was the kind that arrived in plain envelopes. Inside was a photograph. 2 girls. Dark hair. Gray eyes. Standing on the porch of a small house in a town called Miran Bay. Beneath the photograph was a note, handwritten, in Porter's cramped script. Alpha blood. Unregistered. Mercer line. Confirmed through scent sample obtained from a discarded item at the local preschool. Dominic set the photograph on his desk and looked at it for a long time. He was not a man given to dramatic reactions. Drama was wasteful. Drama was noise. Dominic Ashford operated on leverage, the quiet accumulation of facts that could be deployed at the right moment to produce the desired outcome. He had built the Ashford pack into a territorial power through exactly this method, not through wars or conquests but through information, patience, and the precise application of pressure. The Mercer alliance had cost him. Vivian's return, humiliated and hollow from 2 years of rejection sickness, had cost him personally in ways he did not discuss. The treaty had collapsed. The territorial concessions had been revoked. The Eastern Corridor, which Dominic had been promised in exchange for his daughter's bond, remained under Blackstone control. Cale Mercer owed him. And now, sitting on Dominic's desk, was the instrument of collection. Pack law was old and specific and entirely indifferent to modern sentiment. Article 9, Section 4 of the Interpack Governance Code stated that any offspring of a ruling alpha who remained unclaimed and unregistered beyond the age of 3 could be declared wards of the nearest territorial pack. The provision existed to prevent alpha bloodlines from being scattered or exploited. In practice, it had been used exactly twice in the last 100 years, both times as a political weapon. Dominic picked up the phone. "Get me the council liaison," he said, "and pull the governance code, Article 9. 600 miles west, Cale was sitting on his porch in Miran Bay, reading a picture book about a bear, for the 14th time, while Sora listened through the fence and Naya attempted to climb the fence itself, having decided that the gap at the bottom was insufficient for the volume of traffic she intended to produce between the 2 yards. 3 weeks had passed since his arrival. Lena had not invited him inside again, but she had stopped telling him to leave. This was progress. In the language of wolves, this was an opened border, Not an alliance, but a cessation of active hostility, a space in which negotiations could theoretically occur. The twins had no such reservations. Naya had adopted Kale with the speed and totality of a child, who decides something and then simply inhabits the decision as though it has always been true. She brought him rocks. She showed him bugs. She demanded that he watch her jump from the porch steps, which she did repeatedly, each time increasing the height by standing on her tiptoes before launching, and each time looking back to confirm he was watching. He was always watching. Sora's approach was different. She circled. She tested. She asked questions that seemed simple but were not. Where do you live meant where do you really live, not this rented house. Do you have a family? Meant something so enormous that Kale had to sit with it for a full minute before answering, because the honest answer was, I am looking at them, and the safe answer was, it is complicated, and neither was right for a 4-year-old who could detect dishonesty the way other children detected candy. I have a pack, he told her, a group of people who live together and take care of each other. Like a family. Like a big family. Where is it? Far away. In the mountains. Sora processed this. Why are you here instead of there? Because something important is here. What is it? He looked at her. She looked back. The question was not innocent. The question was a key, and she knew it, and she was watching to see if he would use it. You, he said. Sora's expression did not change, but something behind her eyes shifted, a small rearrangement, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Mama does not want you here, she said. I know, but you are here anyway. Yes, that is not polite. No, it is not. But sometimes not polite things are important. He nodded. Sora stood up, brushed off her knees, and walked back to her house. At the door, she turned. The bear does not find his hat, she said, but he gets a new one that is better. Then she went inside. Kale sat on his porch and felt something crack open in his chest that he had thought was permanently sealed. Not the bond, not the wolf, something else. Something that did not have a name in any language he knew but felt a lot like the moment you realize you have been holding your breath for 5 years and you have finally been given permission to exhale. The call came on a Thursday. Kale was at the grocery store, buying the particular brand of apple juice that Naya preferred, the one in the glass bottle that cost twice as much as the plastic, because he had learned that Naya had opinions about juice, and those opinions were non-negotiable, when his phone rang. It was his council secretary. The message was brief. The Ashford Pack had filed a formal petition with the Inter-Pack Governance Council, invoking Article 9, Section 4. The petition named 2 minors of confirmed Alpha Mercer bloodline currently residing unregistered and unclaimed in human territory. The petition requested that the minors be declared wards of the Ashford Pack and relocated to Ashford territory, pending formal custody proceedings. Kale stood in the juice aisle with a glass bottle in one hand and his phone in the other, and his vision went gold at the edges. He called Juno first. How did Ashford find them? Information broker. Someone named Porter. He has been on Ashford's payroll for years. If anyone is buying wolf-related intelligence in the human world, Porter finds out. The suppressant purchases. That is my guess. Porter flagged the purchases, traced them to Mirren Bay, and then confirmed the bloodline through a scent sample. Probably took something from the preschool, a jacket, a crayon, anything with the girl's scent on it. Can we block the petition? Not from the outside. Article 9 is clear. Unclaimed offspring of a ruling alpha in unregistered human territory are eligible for ward status. The only defense is a registered claim by the blood parent. Then I will register a claim. That requires formal acknowledgement before the Governance Council, full disclosure, bloodline confirmation, mate bond verification. I know what it requires. It also requires the mother's consent. Silence. Kale. It requires the mother's consent. He put the juice bottle down, walked out of the store, and went to Lena's door. She opened it on the second knock. She was wearing a faded sweatshirt and her hair was down, and she looked like someone who had been napping, which was good, because sleep was something she had not been getting enough of, and the fact that she was resting meant the worst of the suppressant damage might be stabilizing. "What happened?" she said. Not a question. She could read it on his face. "Dominic Ashford knows about the twins." The color left her skin in a wave. "He has filed a petition under Article 9. He wants them declared wards of his pack." Lena's hand tightened on the doorframe. Her knuckles went white. "He cannot. They are mine. Under pack law, they are unclaimed. I have not formally acknowledged them. You are not registered as a pack member. In the eyes of the Governance Council, those girls are alpha-blooded orphans in unsupervised human territory. They are not orphans. I am standing right here. Lena, I know, but the law does not care about what is true. It cares about what is filed." She was shaking, not the fine tremor of her hands that had become constant over the past years, but a deeper shake, the kind that starts in the chest and works outward, the body's response to a threat it cannot outrun. "What do I do?" she whispered. "Let me claim them." "No. Lena, if you claim them, they belong to Blackstone. They belong to the pack. They belong to councils and ceremonies and politics and everything I ran from. If I do not claim them, Dominic takes them." The sentence landed between them with the weight of a stone dropped into still water. Lena stared at him. He watched the calculation happen behind her eyes, the impossible mathematics of a mother measuring two terrible options and trying to find a third that did not exist. "There is one condition," she said. "Name it. You do not claim them unless you claim me." Cale went still. "You do not get to acknowledge your daughters while their mother remains invisible. You do not get to stand before a council and say these are my children while the woman who raised them alone for 5 years stands in the back of the room as an unnamed omega. If you want your blood recognized, you recognize mine, publicly, before the council, as your bonded mate, not a political arrangement, not a treaty negotiation, a choice. Lena, this is not a discussion. This is the price. You pay it, or you do not." He looked at her. She was leaning against the doorframe, as though it was the only thing keeping her upright, and maybe it was. She was thin and exhausted, and her wolf was nearly dead, and she had just made a demand of the most powerful wolf in 5 territories, with the calm certainty of someone who had nothing left to lose. "Yes," he said. "Yes what?" "Yes to everything. Before the council. Publicly. As a choice. As the choice I should have made 5 years ago." Lena searched his face. She was looking for the lie, the calculation, the political maneuver wrapped in sentiment. She was looking for Owen Drake's smile, the smooth management of a complication. She did not find it. "The council meets in 10 days, Cale said. "Dominic will push for an expedited hearing. We need to be there, all of us. The girls cannot travel. Naya's wolf is waking up. She is having episodes. Claws, growling, sensory overload. If she shifts on a highway, I cannot. I will bring the council here. You cannot bring the Interpack Governance Council to Mirren Bay. I am the Alpha King. I can bring them wherever I want." For the first time in 5 years, something moved across Lena's face that was not fear or anger or exhaustion. It was hope. Small, guarded, the kind of hope that has been beaten down so many times it barely lifts its head. But it was there. The council convened in Mirren Bay 11 days later. They met in the town hall, a building that had last been used for a school board meeting about parking lot drainage, and was now filled with the most powerful wolves in the Northern Territories, sitting in folding chairs under fluorescent lights, while Gladys from the diner provided coffee in styrofoam cups. Dominic Ashford arrived with 4 advisors and a legal team. He wore a dark suit. He carried a leather briefcase. He looked like a man who had already won and was simply going through the formalities. Cale arrived with Juno, 2 council witnesses, and no lawyers. Lena arrived last, holding her daughter's hands. The hearing was formal. Dominic presented his petition with the precision of someone who had been preparing for this moment since the photograph landed on his desk. Article 9. Unclaimed offspring. Unregistered territory. The governance code was clear. The council chair, an elderly wolf named Margaret Hollow, listened without expression. She had presided over these hearings for 30 years, and she had seen every possible configuration of power, desperation, and law. Nothing surprised her. "Alpha Mercer," she said when Dominic finished. "Do you wish to respond?" Cale stood. The room went quiet. Not the quiet of attention, the quiet of anticipation. Every wolf in that room could feel the bond between Cale and Lena, could sense the 5-year accumulation of denied recognition pressing against the walls like heat. "I acknowledge Naya and Sora as my blood, as my daughters, as members of the Mercer line, with all the rights and protections that lineage carries." Dominic's expression did not change. Acknowledgement requires a registered bond with the mother. The governance code is specific. "I am aware of what the code requires." Cale turned to Lena. She was sitting in a folding chair in the second row, one daughter on each side. Naya was fidgeting. Sora was watching everything with the focused intensity of a hawk. He walked to her. He stood in front of her. Every wolf in the room watched. He knelt. Not the formal kneel of a ceremony, not the political kneel of an alpha making a calculated gesture. He knelt on the industrial carpet of a small-town community hall with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and styrofoam coffee cups on the table behind him, and he looked up at a woman in a second-hand coat and said the words that pack law required and that he should have said 5 years ago. "I claim you, as my mate, as my bond, as the mother of my children and the partner of my life, not as a treaty, not as a duty, as the only choice I should have ever made." Lena's hands were shaking. Naya had gone still, staring at the man on his knees. Sora's eyes were wide, and for the first time in her short life, she was not watching with analysis. She was watching with something raw. "This claim is witnessed," Margaret Hollow said quietly. Dominic stood. "The claim is retroactive. The code requires registration at the time of." "The code requires acknowledgement before a seated council," Margaret interrupted. "The council is seated. The acknowledgement has been made. The bond is verified. I can feel it from here, Dominic. So can every wolf in this room." Dominic's jaw tightened. "The petition is denied," Margaret said. "The minors are claimed offspring of a recognized alpha bond. Article 9 does not apply." Dominic looked at Cale. He looked at Lena. He looked at the twins. "This is not over," he said quietly. "Yes," Margaret said, closing her file. "It is." Dominic left. His advisors followed. The legal team packed their briefcases with the controlled efficiency of people who know they have lost, but intend to bill for the full day. The room emptied slowly. Margaret nodded to Cale as she passed. Juno slipped out through a side door. The fluorescent lights continued to buzz. Cale was still on his knees. Lena looked at him. He looked at her. The bond between them was fully open now. No suppressants, no distance, no denial. It was enormous and terrifying and warm in a way that neither of them had allowed themselves to feel for 5 years. "Get up," she said. "Not until you say something." "I do not forgive you. I know. I am angry, and I am tired, and I have been doing this alone for 5 years, and you do not get to kneel on a carpet and fix that with a speech. I know. You get 1 year. 1 year to prove that this is not another treaty, another political move, another thing you do because the position requires it. 1 year. 1 year. And if you fold my clothes while I am sleeping, I will end you." Something crossed his face. Not quite a smile. Something before a smile. The structural preparation for one. "Understood." Naya tugged on Lena's sleeve. "Mama, the big man is on the floor." "I know, baby." "Is he broken?" "No." Lena looked at Cale, still kneeling, still waiting, still present in the way he should have been present 5 years ago. "He is not broken, he is just late." She stood up. She took Naya's hand with her left and Sora's hand with her right, and she walked out of the town hall and into the September evening. The air smelled like salt, and the fishing boats were coming in, and the town was moving through its routines, and nothing had changed, and everything had changed. Behind her, she heard Kael stand. She heard his footsteps on the stairs. She heard him follow, at a distance, the way he had been following for 3 weeks, close enough to be present and far enough to be respectful. Sora looked back over her shoulder at him. "The bear got a new hat," she said. "He did," Kael said. "Is it better than the old one?" "I think it might be." Sora nodded once, a small, decisive gesture that was so perfectly Kael's own that Lena felt something crack in her chest. The last wall, the one she had built to survive. She kept walking. She did not look back. But she did not close the curtains that night. And when Naya threw the ball over the fence the next morning, Lena opened the gate and let Kael walk through.